So this is the EV panel. I don't know if that's why it's lonely in here.
And it's right after lunch on the last day.
On the last day, it's tough. I'm not sure if you all saw this morning, J.D. Power issued a new press release saying EV consideration rose in April. Of course, $4 plus gas, thanks to the war in Iran. That went up to 26% of shoppers saying they're very likely to buy an EV, up 3 points from March. And at the same time, those who said they were very unlikely to do so fell to 18% from 22%. So we know new EV sales have fallen off since last September. Several vehicle programs have been killed or put on ice. High prices and range remain concerns, barriers for many to adoption. But there is interest, and it can be cultivated into sales. And most consumers who experience an EV tend to stick with that powertrain. So we have this great panel here to help you think through the opportunities and some tactics and what you all can do. Ryan Austin, CEO of Lyteflo out of Toronto. Liza Borchis, President and CEO of Carter Myers Automotive. And tell us how many stores, how many franchises?
26 stores, 18 different franchises.
Okay.
Almost all non-luxury.
Sweet. And John Foley, CEO and co-founder of Recharged. Thanks for y'all for being here. I want to encourage you all to put questions into the app. I think we all get graded based on how many questions you submit. So
this
please,
is our report card. Please,
5 stars only.
Put them in the app, and you find the thing. So, Liza, let me start with you. Some brands have been really consistent, maybe slow and steady with EVs. Others have had kind of wild swings in their strategies. Where do you see things now? How do you try to keep your company well positioned for this world?
Yep. So I'll start with saying I am a EV believer. My whole family drives EVs. Like you said, once you drive one, it's hard to go back. And we, a handful of years ago, when we were really almost being forced to lean into EVs, we at CMA were not, but I think our industry was, really wanted to be a leader in that space and said, we're going to go all in. And we had EV champions in our dealerships. We invested a lot in EV training. Really wanted to make sure that we were a part of the future and a partner with our manufacturers in moving this forward. And it was extremely unfortunate, I think, how all this has played out. I don't think it's ended up good for the consumer, certainly not good for our manufacturers, and not great for dealers. So where are we now? We're sitting in a moment on the new car side, and we're going to talk a lot about the used car side, I think, a bit separately. On the new car side, where we sit in a lot of small to medium-sized markets, that we were not doing a high volume of EVs anyway. But we invested millions of dollars in infrastructure, forced upon us by our manufacturers, often without much thought put into it. We have chargers sitting in multiple dealerships that don't work, that the companies went out of business and there's no support for. We have technicians who we've trained and gotten certified, and we've put in EV bays and battery storage spaces and new facilities that were meant to prepare us for an EV future. So there's a little bit of disappointment and I think negative morale around the dealership because of all of that. However, the numbers you just shared and what I know about EVs, I am still very positive that EV is going to be a part of our future. And I think over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to start seeing smarter decisions made from our manufacturers around where the price points are, trying to figure out how we're going to take all the off-lease vehicles and get some residual, at least consistency that we can count on so we can understand what the future market is going to look like. And I think that we're at a moment where we can reset with our manufacturers around what future investments are going to look like that hopefully will not be forced upon us. We're going to have a larger voice in that, I believe, as dealer partners, and allow us to reset for smarter decisions around a partnership of EVs with our manufacturers. I think starting probably mid-2027 into early 2028 is when we're going to start seeing a smart flow again on the retail side.
Is that timing related to the Ford EV, the affordable, supposed to be profitable.
Well, I think it's not just Ford, but if you look at plans from quite a few of our manufacturers who are trying to figure out the right price points, how to shift and adapt their EV investments from where we were 24 months ago. And I think it's going to take them that long to readjust.
Yeah, at least.
At least.
Ryan, do the automakers and dealers still struggle to communicate, to explain what they're selling when it comes to EVs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that we often hear is that the shopper knows more than the salesperson, right? And some GMs don't see a problem with that. Interestingly, they're like, yeah, we're good. We sell sales and merchandising tools to help educate the salespeople so that they can have the best information to answer, questions from the customer. And the dealers will be like, hey, the customer knows more than us. We're good. And I'm like, really? You're okay with that? Right? And so, education is definitely a problem. But I think it comes down to understanding whether you want to be in this business or not, and whether you want to, because it's not something that you can really dip your toe into, right? You have to do training. You have to put your salespeople in the cars so that they live with those cars. So they're speaking from experience, and they're not just saying like, I don't know anything about this car. You should buy this gas car, without qualifying the customer, asking them, how far do they drive? Do they live in a house where they can install a charger? Having someone who can install a charger, which is critical. You shouldn't even be selling these things if your answer isn't, we have electrician that we work with, or multiple electricians, they're going to call you tomorrow to install, because that's a key part of the ownership experience. So all of these pieces need to kind of be in place, and it requires like a focused strategy from leadership in the dealership. It's not just like, hey, we'll pick up, if there's something on trade, we'll take it and we'll try and sell it. And, it'll sit there for 60, 70, 80 days because they're not set up for this product. And EVs are very different than gas vehicles. The questions you're going to get, the understanding if it fits the needs of the customer, because you don't want to force it on them. You're trying to sell them the best product for their lifestyle. And oftentimes that will be EV for some number of customers, but we're not even giving them a chance if we're not, salespeople aren't educated, they haven't lived with the product, and we don't have the tools either to answer questions around fuel savings or maintenance savings or, anything like that. Home charging. How am I getting a home charger? Is there infrastructure? Are there chargers around when I go visit my in-laws 2 hours away? All of these, you have to be perfect on the answers. And to your question, most dealers are not.
Do you need the whole staff to be trained? I hear sometimes from dealers like, hey, I've got my EV guy.
Yeah.
And they've got one or two they've owned one, they've figured all the things out, they're evangelists for it.
Yep.
It's hard to convert the whole staff.
It's a great question. So I think it's a crawl, walk, run. So absolutely, I think that you should be trying to avoid staff that are not certified, whatever you want to call it. They are trained, they've lived with the vehicles, they know them. The worst experience you can have as a customer talking to somebody who doesn't know the product. The worst. And that's going to reverberate. They're going to tell their friends, I went to, such and such dealer, probably Liza's competitor dealerships, and they knew nothing about the product and whatever, right? So I always recommend if you're new to this, the space and going in on EVs, have one, maybe two people that are trusted. They're EV certified, and they get all the leads for the EVs. When someone comes in, they're the ones who are dealing with them. And, when they see that those people are selling EVs because they know the product and they're comfortable with them, more people are like, oh, I want to be, EV certified too, because I see that Jim over there is making some sales. So, but yeah, to your question, you want a limited number of people doing it at first, for sure.
Ultimately, you want everybody so they can serve any customer that comes in. Yeah. But maybe
be realistic.
With one or two.
Exactly. Be realistic. We're not going to get there in one day.
Year. Yeah.
One of the smartest things that a lot of our OEMs did was put in employee leases that were extremely attractive. And that helped so much when we were at that point. Volkswagen, Honda, several others we got a lot. I think our market share within some of our dealerships was better than most of the states.
For sure. John, tell us a little about Recharged. How did you get this started? What all do you do?
Yeah, so we sell used EVs, and that's all we sell. And I think back to the time that Liza was describing where the manufacturers were putting these stringent requirements on the OEMs to, participate in EV sales, and you had to make all these huge investments. And that's really where Recharge was born. I was looking around at that time and considering my own frontline experience in the used space, and recognized that at least there had to be some reason for doing this more than just trying to force EV sales. I think there was recognition that EV buyers were looking for a differentiated experience, and your facilities had to be prepared, the people had to be prepared, to do that. And so, in my mind, the same problem would exist on the used car side, and that's where I wanted to be and try to help solve that. So that's where we came from. Today, I think we face the same challenges. There's not a bunch of certified EV salespeople on Indeed looking for jobs. So you kind of have to help them get there through training, and we focus on hiring folks who are hyper curious because we do have experts on the ground, but the rest of them have to be brought up, and so we're looking for some problem solvers that'll try to figure those things out.
How do you get your inventory? Is it from auctions? Is it from off the street? Or is it dealers who are sitting on, like Ryan's scenario earlier, sitting on an EV they took on a trade that they don't know how to sell and they dump it to you?
Yes, and yes. I mean, all of those. Some of the problems that we've seen with selling the EVs on the new car side are price related. It's incredible, some of the discounts we've seen in the used car market. And so for me and my point of view, I'm looking at buyers who are very curious about EVs. When I think ahead, I'm I don't know how this stops. People are very, they want to buy these cars, but they do have to be at the right price point. So we buy from auction, we buy direct from consumer. We work more and more on obtaining these cars upstream because, remarketers are challenged with trying to move these vehicles, and dealerships not understanding what the product is and what the value of that car is. And then, we've bought new cars from dealers who don't know how to sell them or can't sell them. And we've done very well with those too. So,
your focus on used EVs is interesting, right? We've got some new EVs are still coming out, but a lot of them are being idled or killed off entirely. But the used EVs are poised for growth. There's a big surge of vehicles that should be coming off lease over the next couple of years or so. How do you manage through that opportunity? It seems like there'll be a big surge in supply. Is there going to be enough demand to absorb it?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I think so. But I am curious, what happens behind that? Does an administration change, kind of reshape the future of EVs again? I think, you look globally, and I think it would give you a lot of confidence that, EV sales will continue. You look at, the stats you just mentioned around, used EV market, it continues to grow. So there are plenty of people interested in buying EVs, and I think that'll continue.
Mm-hmm. Can the three of you talk a little about how different markets adopt EVs differently? We know it in general. We say, the coasts are more eager to get an EV, try new technology, and people in the middle of the continent, not as much. I'm not sure your experience actually reflects that bias that we tend to have.
I'll start. Yeah. So when I launched Recharge, trying to figure out where I wanted to start, Richmond was my backyard, and that's where I ended up. But I did consider, moving to some different markets, and maybe, a market where EV adoption was much higher than Richmond, Virginia. But really wanted to kind of prove out the concept. And I thought Richmond, gave me that opportunity. Today, I'm glad to have an experience center in Richmond where people can come in, they can see all these different makes and models beside each other drive, but we sell far more of our cars outside of Virginia. And when I look at the markets that, are buying, they might be markets where there's a lot more adoption. So, somebody's more comfortable buying an EV6, having it shipped to, anywhere out west, because their neighbor has one and the other, so the idea of buying it is very comfortable for them. And where locally they might want to come in and get that experience first.
So you sell both to people in your community and long distances?
Yeah, very much so.
Cool. How about
Yeah, so I think speaking generally, obviously it's easier to sell an EV in California than it is I was just talking to a dealer in Idaho, right? But I think there are some surprising facts around this. So I think firstly, I want to segment the new and the used market because it's important to have a compelling product at a compelling price point. And I think in the new market, that's struggled to hit the right price point, right? And so when we look at the used market where you can get a Tesla Model 3 for the same price literally as a Toyota Camry, and the value proposition becomes really compelling when I'm looking, at a Tesla Model 3. Okay, Camry's a fine vehicle, don't get me wrong, but full self-driving is, and Tesla Model 3. So I've seen dealers in Oklahoma City who are saying, I want to lean into this used EV opportunity right now because, again, you have these compelling products at these compelling prices, and they want to, run a playbook to do that with whether it's battery health reports, how am I going to source this inventory, how am I going to get my website cleaned up, how am I going to train my team? And I'm surprised to see someone, Oklahoma City, VW dealers in Orlando. I mean, it's not Orlando, Florida has pretty good EV adoption, but I wouldn't think a VW dealer in Orlando would be selling 60 EVs, used EVs a month, right? And so I think once you have a compelling product at a compelling price point in many areas of the country where you wouldn't think this is, it's Washington, it's the really heavy EV adoption states, it can work. Now, there are still some areas, again, I was talking to a dealer out here in Idaho. He's like, guys, I drive 7 hours to see my family, see my in-laws once a month. I can't make that trip 11 hours. And right now, until we figure out faster charging, I don't think it'll be a thing of putting bigger batteries. I think it'll be probably faster charging. There are a few areas where it just won't work. But I think in a lot of areas that aren't the big EV areas, it can definitely work with, particularly with used EVs.
Well, and to me, I think I've shared this 100 times if you've read anything I've written, but I feel like 20 or 30% EV market share should be very doable because the majority of people who buy new vehicles have a fleet. They don't have to drive that EV once a month all the way across Idaho and back, right? You have the one to take to the grocery store and the high school where you go 20 times a week, and then you have the other vehicle in the family in the garage that you use once a month.
That's me.
Yeah. Please.
I'm just going to echo one point he made, and it's the price and the payment getting right makes all the difference. We are not in what I would consider a strong EV market. We are in small, medium-sized markets in Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina. And so right before coming here, I just glanced, I looked at our sales by market for the first 4 months of this year. And Stanton, Virginia is our most rural market. And we've sold more EVs in Stanton when I segmented out a couple of our quarters, and which surprised me. But some of it depended on what was the lease payment. When Volkswagen had their big ID4 situation, we were selling more EVs in Stanton than we were in Richmond, which is odd. And then this first quarter, we sold more Subaru Solterras than any other EV in Stanton, Virginia. So anyway, I think it's more getting the right price and payment for the buyer. I think the next interesting frontier is going to be several of our OEMs plans to take that lease, that off-lease EV, and then have it go into a second lease. That's going to be a really affordable used lease payment that I think could be very attractive for consumers that weren't considering one previously. And I think that's not too far away.
Okay, we have a question from the audience asking what the panel's feelings are on battery for life product or value for customers. We've seen very high, it says VSC costs. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
A vehicle service contract.
Thank you. High VSC costs on used EVs. So what do you think on that kind of
a space where we're looking very actively? So we, at Lyteflo, not a plug for Lyteflo, but we're, because we do battery health reports that evaluate the health of the battery, it's a natural extension for us to offer a battery warranty product as well. And what we're seeing, John can speak firsthand, Dealers that are selling a battery warranty product like Battery for Life are seeing about 40% sell through on that. And you talked about the high VSC costs. When you're selling a vehicle service contract, at least from what I've heard from dealers, on a full VSC on an EV can run $5,000 to $7,000, I think. Whereas a battery warranty, which is the top thing that you're concerned about as a used EV buyer, those are $2,500. And so it's kind of a no-brainer if you have a vehicle that's coming up on warranty or is out of manufacturer warranty. By the way, you can go back to the vehicles you've sold already also and offer them a warranty. But it's a really compelling category for the F&I office. I think it's a big opportunity for the used EV business.
How big of a concern is battery health and durability? I mean, for consumers who haven't owned an EV, they're thinking of their phones and how the batteries turn to crap in about 2 years. But cars, it hasn't been that way for most manufacturers and most models.
Yeah, so I think in general, the answer from a dealer when someone asks about concern for the battery or battery life is, in general, these things are awesome and they're really resilient, and you don't need to worry about it any more than you would, mostly any more than you would worry about a gas car breaking down and the transmission going. That said, transmissions do go, right? And sometimes all batteries do degrade, right? And so you're going to lose 2 to 3% a year, and it does depend on the vehicle and how it's stored and all this stuff. But the battery and there are failures on batteries. I think John can share his experience with that, and Liza, if you have some. But I think it's about 0.5%. You'll get a bad faulty cell. You'll have a that kind of thing. So under 1%. Generally, you don't have to worry, but degradation is an important factor for purchasing the vehicle. Understanding how much range is remaining, how much energy is remaining. So we have to know, and we don't, at the same time, we don't have to be too concerned about it failing or a battery fire.
And you guys might know this data point better than I do, so jump in and correct me. But if I'm remembering correctly, when they do fail, the cost of that battery replacement as a percentage of the value of the car is significantly higher than having a transmission go out. And so while the failure rate is low, when it fails, if you don't have that protection, it is significantly more of an issue for the consumer than on an ICE vehicle.
Yeah, I'd say like in the thousands of vehicles that we've been through, I can only think of maybe one or two where there was like a total battery failure that, we identified as the car came in, or even have heard about post-sale, like maybe there's another one or two there. But it is important, I think, to do that battery testing right up front and make sure that, as a dealer, you identify it. Most of their, these are under warranty, and you can quickly resolve, we'll see like very specific, cell repairs that need to be made and get the car back on the road. And it's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal if you don't know and then you sell the car and you find out about it from your customer who has to deal with it after the sale. So,
do you have something on the window sticker? Do you tell them what the status of the battery is or what you found, what you've done to it?
Yeah, so all of our battery testing is integrated with our webpage, so that the moment we do a test, it goes right onto our site and reports that data to the buyers. Ryan and I talked about this a couple nights ago. I mean, I don't know that, we use the example of a Chevy Tahoe, 2018 Chevy Tahoe sitting at a dealership today. Your buyer doesn't come in and ask, what's the compression on the engine. They just have a good feeling that Chevy Tahoes are going to last 250,000 miles, and maybe mine's a bad one, but batteries, I don't think we'll get to that point. I think the confidence might be there, but since it is so easy to assess the health of the battery, we're going to have to report on that forever. So,
cool. If any of you have other questions for the panel, you can go ahead and put them in the app. Even though we are running out of time, we'll try to get to them and get you an answer for anything you need. Last thing before I let you go, fill in the blank, lightning round. Selling EVs in 2026 America is blank. Or Canada.
I don't sell EVs, but my blank EV, my blank would be changing.
Changing. Not just challenging, but changing.
Changing.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate?
Well, I think every day, every week is a new, I've been doing this a few years now. Every week is a new week in EV land. There's always news about either a new EV coming or someone pulling the cutting an EV model. And with what's happened with gas prices, I think that was something that nobody had on their bingo card. And it is that, just as you read at the beginning of this talk, it's creating a big surge in interest in EVs. Dealers are feeling it on the ground. Talk to John and I know customers are coming straight from the gas station in some cases. I'm hearing that from dealers, and then with the used EVs now coming, just 2 months ago, I'd say we were in a very different position than we are now with gas prices and the used EVs and so on.
$100 oil, yeah.
$100 oil will change once it starts to hit your pocketbook. You're looking at that used EV.
Yeah, good.
I would say that the EV market is still an opportunity for dealers, that we should not act like the OEMs did by going 180 degrees the other direction. Make smart business decisions, stock what you think is appropriate for your market, understand that there's used opportunity. When you see that John's selling 300 used EVs a month, there's probably a little piece of that for us too. And so to not turn off the spigot, keep our teams trained, make sure our charging infrastructure continues to work, and then keep the right inventory, make smart business decisions, and don't let go of the EV future.
The right inventory is actually a good point. I just wanted to, you right? Like, I mean, don't have you could talk about mix, but you probably want to be, half the vehicles on the road are Teslas. So you're probably going to want to have a bunch of Teslas, for example. You're not going to want to have a lot of expensive Hummers, for example.
I was about to say, don't get that really expensive Hummer that's been sitting on the front of our lot that we cannot get rid of. If anyone wants it, come see me.
I'll talk to you just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, like, the blank is the best year I've had in the car business in 27 years. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you all for being here. Thanks to our panel. Please give them a big round of applause.